It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Morgan Snyder, and we're going to be discussing his brand new book, Becoming a King, The Path to Restoring the Heart of a Man. Morgan, it is truly an honor. Welcome to the show.
Shaun, good to be with you. I haven't been called special very often, but my 13-year-old, she actually gives me a wink very often, and she goes, "Daddy, you're my special." And she does it with a wink, like I don't really know if that's a compliment. So as you say, a special guest, I'm kind of trying to find the filter. Is that a compliment or not? But either way, it is an honor to be with you. It was great to connect with you before the show. It's a privilege to be with your tribe, and I'm excited to offer what I can.
Yeah, I also have teenagers, and sometimes they say those things that they may be compliments, they may be kind of poking fun at you. You just never know. But I will say, in the context of this interview, I meant it in the most honorable way possible.
I receive it.
I like to kick off every interview with a bit of the author's origin story. So in terms of the Morgan Snyder origin story, for the listeners, the viewers, the folks who are meeting you for the very first time in our talk today, what are a few things we need to know about you? Give us a little bit of context.
Yeah, to keep it as personal as I can, we were chatting about this before the show, but you're calling in from Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and I'm in Colorado. But my first kiss with my bride took place right around the corner from you on the altar of First Presbyterian Church. And what's so significant about that moment, and I've never told that story on a podcast, so here you go. But that was not my childhood. I was a very young and uninitiated man growing up in a loving home that was not a Christ-centered home. And so I chased the things of the world to find life. I was a young, eager man looking to answer my soul's question. Do I have what it takes? Where do I find life? And I used everything to answer that question. A lot of it was leadership. That was one of my drugs. And my medicators, one was women. That was a medicator. And I had a radical turning, a crisis that led to God in college. And that began my apprenticeship in the kingdom. And so from a man who really caused harm, to be very frank, to the hearts of other people, I began a new life, a life that began with a lot of confession and amending to relationships, to a man that wanted to become the kind of man, the kind of person that can truly be entrusted by God with the care of the hearts of others, to be entrusted with care of parts of his kingdom. And so even with my sexuality, it's fun to know that you're in Illinois, because that first kiss, that was not my first kiss, but it was my first kiss with my bride. We had a chance, because of God, to start over, and both of us came into Christ. Both of us got a clean slate in a way, and we chose to do it in a way where we really took God up on his offer of your life. And your light is the light of men. And so we protected our sexuality. And like I said, though, I've never told this story publicly, because that's not the point. It wasn't simply morality. It was, we are life seekers. And we had a kiss every other way a kiss can be acquired, but we had never had the kiss of a covenant of marriage. And we withheld, and we were so fanned into flames, as Song of Songs says. And that kiss was delicious and delightful. And it was a reminder that God is life. He is life, and he makes life available. And so it's just a particular story to illuminate the metaphor that my wife and I, became kingdom apprentices. And so though I was a Christian, I was still young at heart. I was still a boy in a man's body. I was still uninitiated. And the story of the last 25 years of my life since that altar was the story of a young man being fathered as a son and being initiated as a man into the wholeness of the kingdom. And so the book and the full work of my ministry has been the story of making the ancient path that I've recovered available to others.
Well, I'd love to have you actually take us a little bit into kind of your wilderness journey, that time, whether it was a decade or more ago, where you were just at a place of, feeling lost, alone, disoriented. And, as we look back from our current vantage point, that was a catalyst that eventually gets you to the point where you wrote this book that's going to be coming out here shortly. But I think that aspect of your story, that is so relatable, because I know so many men who get to that place. And I feel like it's sometimes happening earlier today, where we always talk about, the midlife crisis, people in their 30s, people in their 40s, they're going to go out and buy a sports car to try to fill that gaping hole in their life. But I feel like younger men, I'm in my early 40s, like they're hitting this wall even earlier in life. And so I feel like that's an important thing we need to kind of pull on that string right now, early on in the interview. So tell us about kind of your wilderness journey. What were you facing?
Yeah, it started with two things, really, Shaun. I would say one was longing, an intense desire for life, and then pain of, wow, it's not going well. That's really the epicenter of it. And it just harkens to the scriptures, where we're created in the image of God and we're endowed with power uniquely as men and as women, the scriptures say. And then we're given this wild invitation to rule. We are entrusted with great power. And then he hands over the keys to the kingdom to us. And one of the quotes that's really shaped my last 25 years is from Dallas Willard, where he suggests that the primary work of God is finding people in whom he can entrust his power. And the story of most men is being entrusted with power and it bringing harm to themselves and those under their care. And all you have to do is get on Google and search the news and look at the top 10 stories, and you will find the theme of people entrusted with power and them not getting to live beyond self-interest by omission or commission. They don't bring the good. They're not able to exercise authority in love. And so as a young man, my kingdom was expanding. And that is to say, what was entrusted to my care. We all have a kingdom. We all have a realm where we have say. You got to choose. I got to choose what we ate for breakfast this morning and what we wore today. And I like your denim vest there. Or denim jacket. You look good. Good choice. We all have a choice, right? My son was bestowed a cell phone a couple years ago. And it was a grieving moment because I knew in my soul as a dad, his kingdom was expanding. It was the first time where his realm reached beyond my realm. And it was on time. He was ready, but I knew he could bring a greater good or greater harm. And so the question is, what have we done with our kingdom? And so I found myself a young man where the external did not match the internal. Externally, I was killing it. A beautiful wife and beautiful children and meaningful work and a global mission. But internally, there were questions. I was still unsatisfied. I was still bent on achievement. It was never enough. I felt perpetually behind. Just name anything. My fitness, my finances, my yard work, always behind. And I found there was anxiety, there was fear, and there were more questions surfacing. And so I set my heart on pilgrimage. I turned to God, Shaun, and said, where's life? What is the most important thing? What are the pitfalls? Where do men miss it? Because I feel like I'm at a crossroads. I have a young marriage and young children and young career, and it's not working. And I don't want to blow up my world. I don't want to fight bravely and die quickly. And so I started seeking God, and through God, he led me to older men. And I made a list of older men, and I asked them those questions, the questions of my masculine heart. Where is life found? What is the most important thing? What are the pitfalls? And over time came counsel, lingering over a letter that came from a far distance, over a phone call, perhaps a pint over a campfire locally. Their counsel came, and it was a balm for my soul. It was a healing experience in and of itself. And Shaun, over 75 men, over 2 years, what happened was a recovery of something. It wasn't new, but it was newly recovered. And I think what I would close with on this thought is, G.K. Chesterton in the brilliant book Orthodoxy suggests that every generation loses the gospel, and every generation is charged with its recovery. And it's so helpful and hopeful. You were sharing before the show that your audience is very broad. You have deep conservatives, and then you have deep charismatics, right? You have people that are deeply homeschooled, and then you have people that are in vibrant school systems. And what's so beautiful is everyone gets a piece and everyone brings a portion, and together we purify that which is most true and good and beautiful. And so every generation loses it and every generation recovers it. And that's what keeps it pure. And what I found was the recovery of something deeply pure. And what I found was an invitation to live this gospel that was an upside down kingdom, to do the opposite of the world. The world said build, but the invitation for me was to excavate. The world says there's a way to get it quick, and the kingdom says there are no shortcuts. And so the last 20 years, 25 years was consenting to this path and process of recovering the ancient path that leads to life.
And I'd like to pull just a little bit more on that string related to the sages, the mentors you allowed to speak into your life. I would imagine some of those folks came into your life intentionally as maybe you sought them out. Some of it probably just happened organically along the path, along the journey. How did you decide who got to speak into your life? Because I feel like that will be helpful for somebody listening to this, somebody watching this, where they're not sure maybe about who to allow to speak into their life for these kind of core difficult things they're walking through. So for you, that aspect of your journey, were there any filters or kind of guidelines you followed for that?
It's a brilliant question, because right on this podcast, before this podcast, I took a walk and just took a little wild space I could find near my house and was just praying about podcasts. And there was a blog coming to my heart that I want to write one day that I haven't yet written. And the title is Really Bad Counsel. I was just reflecting, there are a couple categories where I have received incredibly bad counsel from incredibly good men. And what I realized was, as I look back, and this is years looking back, wisdom's long view of, they were just too close to it, right? They were speaking out of a good heart, but they were speaking out of their own story in a way that simply wasn't true to my story or wasn't true to God in my story. And so what I want to say is, anytime we bring our heart to another, we are bringing a wounded heart. We are bringing a needy heart, and we cannot look to another soul to provide that which only God can provide. So what I would say is, my story of relentlessly pursuing counsel and pursuing mentors, Shaun, there was something that it was risky, and I got hurt a lot. I got hurt as much as I got blessed. And I think that's important to put words to. And it took me years to come to a place of relying first and foremost on God as my Father, that my primary guide is the Holy Spirit, that my primary voice is God as Father, that Jesus as my brother is my primary source of the impossible possible and the primary path of power in my life. And having said that, rooting my heart in God, then it gives me the ability to open my heart to the counsel of others, but also sift it, also curate it, distill it, take it with a posture of curiosity, but also discernment. And so from that, I got really wide reaching of who I would listen to. Sometimes it was the guy in the plumbing aisle at Home Depot, right? Where I would say, I know nothing about this. I know a lot with my mind, but I've not worked a lot with my hands. I have a toilet that's broken and I don't have a lot of money and I can't call a guy. I need initiation. And I remember sitting outside of the Home Depot parking lot and saying, God, I need you to father me. I need you to come through for me. And so often I was fathered by Home Depot. I was fathered by YouTube. I was fathered by an old Marine that was a handyman. And I said, I need to learn how to install an all-house attic fan. I have enough courage to get involved. I don't have enough courage, or I don't have enough wisdom to do it myself. So I'm going to hire you on the caveat that you'll let me do it with you. And he said, well, that's kind of different. No one's ever asked for that before, but I'm kind of a different guy, right? And I did it with him. And Shaun, side by side with my buddy Skip, who's now become a dear friend, is he would say things like, son, do it like you're stupid, not like you're smart. You're the kind of guy that's been doing it all your life like you're smart. Sometimes you need to do it like you're stupid. It was a brilliant piece of counsel. Now, I don't want his counsel on marriage, and I surely don't want his counsel on parenting, but I want his counsel on working with my hands. And so it's pieces and parts of putting together a mosaic of the heart of God coming to us in a very orchestrated way by God.
Well, you've mentioned the word fathering a number of times, and throughout the book, you walk us through a series of identity shifts, looking at, what does it mean to become a king, to become a son, to become a warrior, and other similar concepts. And of those identity shifts, the individual journey, is that becoming a son, is that the most important one to start with? Or I'm just curious in terms of your own experience, and as you've shared this with others, is there any order to how those should roll out?
I would suggest that there are things about initiation, both feminine initiation and masculine initiation, that are universal, and also things that are unique. And so what I want to suggest is it's very delicate, it's nuanced, it's both and. And so the question I would ask back, that we have to listen to our own soul and the text of our own story, is what is unique and what is universal? There are unique things that we bring to the world about God, right? There are ways that we can know God that uniquely no one else knows. There are parts of his heart that we bring that no one else brings. And also there are things that we universally bring in the human experience, and we universally bring as men and as women. And so with that in mind, what I would turn to is Gordon MacDonald, when he said this beautiful and just arresting phrase, when he suggested that the hardest and gladdest thing in all the earth is to cry out, Father, from a whole heart, with a full heart. The refusal to look to God as Father is the one central misery and the one central wrong in all of the human experience. And so in some ways, what I would suggest is, yes, the doorway in through sonship, of coming to know God as a son, as a daughter, in some ways, it opens up everything else. I believe that we see things not as they are, but as we are. And so as we live as orphans and slaves, fundamentally, life will always be up to us. We will always be the center of our story, no matter how heroic that story is. It still is a very small story. Brene Brown brilliantly used this phrase, engineering smallness. So as long as we're at the center of the story, we are living a small story, and it's engineering smallness. But when we are consented to a larger story at which we are not the center, and we're responding to an invitation, to a process of initiation to become a son and to respond to something that we did not originate. It begins with God as a father orchestrating our initiation, and our first and foremost movement is to respond to his initiation. At that point, we can begin a path and a process by which all other doors are made open to us.
Well, and when it comes to...
I'm curious what you think about that. What comes to mind when you hear that from me? I see in your eyes. I want to hear you. What do you think about that on a personal level?
Well, on the one hand, I would say, as somebody who grew up without a dad, I feel very deeply the need to step through that door of sonship first, or have along my journey. Yes. So that would definitely be the one that I would gravitate towards. However, as you're talking, the thing that's been rolling around in my head is, like, I feel like those are maybe different doors we need to step to, or different places in our life that need to be poured into, depending on what we're facing. Because sometimes we have to face something as a son, and we need to partner with our father in a specific way to solve a problem, go after something. Sometimes we need to be the warrior. Sometimes we need to be the king. So, I feel like it's, something might rise to the surface as we press in and go after a certain situation. It's kind of all at the same time, but maybe individually for that specific thing we're facing.
Yes.
So that's how I would try to make sense of it in my head.
I so appreciate that. And that's where it's both and it's really layered. And that's where this gets so fun, where it is a unique path and process of apprenticeship. There are the universal and there are the unique. And so I think what I would challenge to the listeners is asking this question is, what is your frontier? What is the place in which God is inviting you to mature, to integrate the parts of your soul? And it is unique and universal. And so for your example, we started this conversation with a kiss, and I'm going to go back to that. I was sitting under the guidance of a wise elder, and he was talking about some clients that he had counseled, two young men that just came into his office the day before me. And he said this one young man came in and told his story. And it was a college program. And he said, my counsel to you is you need to kiss a girl before the semester's over. And the guy freaked out. It was just fear, right? Okay, pause. Next guy that comes in tells a story. This elder says, this is my counsel to you. For this semester, you need to not kiss a single woman. Fear. Terror, okay? Two men, the exact opposite assignment with the same effect. The issue, the prescription of what the soul needed wasn't as insightful as the effect in which it caused, right? Because both of them, it was pressing into where they were going for life, for validation, for value apart from God. And both of them were invited uniquely into their masculine initiation. And so I really agree with you, Shaun, that we need to consider, what do we universally need to recover as a human being? And then what is the particular path in which God is shepherding that apprenticeship for us?
Well, and I think a lot about judging a book by its cover and a book by its title. And I know for some people, when they see things related to following the ancient paths and, going deeper with God, they're thinking, man, does this mean I got to read my Bible for an hour a day and I got to pray for 2 hours a day? And it's just a bunch of religious exercises to whip me into shape.
Yeah, it's so fair. It's so fair.
But you talk about that adventure and play are a part of this journey with God. And so would love for you to just talk a little bit about how, while pursuits of, growing in faith and going deeper with God, all good. Prayer is an aspect of it. I hope everybody's growing in prayer where they can pray for longer and longer and just experience and be in relationship with God more and more each day. Same thing with reading their Bible, but it's not all quiet time. There's also fun and adventure to be had too.
Absolutely. This will deeply encourage the tribe. So that tribe out there, tune in right now. I just want you to tune in because this is joy. 75 men or more, their collective counsel. Here's what's fascinating. The number one theme that they talked about the most comes down to one word. And I would say it this way. It was play. Now, these are mostly achieving men. These are mostly guys that have fought, that have suffered, that have blood, sweat, and tears carved out a meaningful legacy. Shaun, the number of men that look me in the eye, many of them with tears, most of them, almost all of them speaking out of regret, saying, I wish I would have played more. I wish I would have taken a 2-week vacation. I wish I would have been present to the wife of my youth. I wish I would have been present to my kids. I wish I would have relaxed and taken an exhale. I wish I would have enjoyed the treasures that came in seasons that are no longer available to me because of the way life has transpired. I had a man who said these young years of young kids, young parenting, he said he could remember, it was like a roller coaster, and all he could do was hold on. And then 2 decades later, his wife walked out and left the family, and with her went his memory. He said he didn't remember when his daughter drove for the first time when she was 16, he didn't remember that championship football game of his son. He was there, but he wasn't there. And so what I want to encourage the listener is to consider play is actually some of the deepest work of the kingdom of God. But play only comes out of the reality of a person who does the work of soul to be able to rest, to be able, as one mentor said, to drop your pencil at 5 o'clock, not because your work is done, but because you can say, that's enough for a day. And we live in a world that never sleeps and never slows. And we live in a culture of progress where it will always be more and more, faster and faster. And so the invitation of a God is a God who laughs and plays himself. God is a warrior, but God is also playful. And that invitation is true, to be sure. And so for a person, one of the wise sayings that came out is never trust a man who can't dance. We take ourselves too seriously. And I have had to learn to play. Every year on my birthday, I do a headstand. Not because I'm a gymnast. I'm actually very awkward. I'm getting more awkward by the year, but it's an annual reminder to not take life so seriously. And that also is a doorway into the ancient path.
As I was looking at the table of contents, one of the chapter titles, one of the themes that I thought fit really well for the transformative process you're having us walk through in the book is this idea of becoming good soil. And I'd love to use this as a segue to give you an opportunity to talk to us about what's going on over at becomegoodsoil.com. Talk to us about the related podcasts. If people go to that site and check that out, what are they going to discover there?
Yeah, so I told the story of a young, eager man, gifted, intense, loving God, but still immature, still uninitiated, still a man that looking back was mostly looking to bring my strength to answer a question rather than to bring a strength in service of love on behalf of others. And so I consented to a path and a process. I entered what is brutal to say on the surface, but was life-saving of, I would call it a decade of middle management. It was a time of the hidden years. It was a time of excavating over building, a season of taking the lower seat at the table, of choosing to be built by God rather than to build my own kingdom. I took all the counsel from these sages, and then I'm a voracious reader, and so I poured into ancient texts and current texts to find those same themes. And in time and over time, God made it impossible not to share. So I gathered 20 men my age. At this point, it was guys young, in their young 30s, and pizza and beers, and I just read the literature. I read what I'd gathered. And afterwards, we felt the spirit in the room, and we all just went, literally, holy crap. This is gold. Like, this is the recovery of something. It's not new, but it is newly recovered. There's a way that seems right to a man, the proverb says, that leads to death. But there is a narrow path that leads to life. And we stacked hands and we said, what if we gave it a decade? What if we said we're all in and we're going to risk an upside down kingdom and find life that's truly life? And so what began was the Become Good Soil Intensive, where I gathered 12 young, eager, like-hearted, kingly-hearted men. I gathered a few sages, and we unpacked this counsel, and we unpacked our own stories, and we offered reflections of what we heard in each other's stories, and we offered care, genuine care for men to be known and loved. And that Become Good Soil Intensive matured over a decade to where it became worldwide events in Australia and other places where we'd gather thirsty, like-hearted men, and we would gather sages, and we would do the deep work and risk the path of becoming. And out of that came podcasts where I simply wanted to encourage and strengthen men consenting to a radical reorientation that were centered in becoming a kingdom apprentice. A lot of the blogs were about me taking these elders and these sages and interviewing them and asking them the questions online. So I basically relived those conversations and said, now we're going to speak to a wider tribe. What is your counsel? Speak out of your life. And I went to all those authors and worship leaders and friends and mentors that I met along the way and tried to curate and distill treasures to offer to a wider circle. So the story of Become Good Soil is me shepherding kind of what's been entrusted to my care to offer some of those treasures to the like-hearted. And only recently has then the book Becoming a King and the video series and study guide come out of that. But it's simply the fruit of 2 decades of living the message myself and just really wanting to be obedient to God in the timing and in the message and in the form. And so that is my attempt to kind of respond back to God what he gave to me and to reach the many, to find the few, because in every generation, history proves that it's always on the fringes and it's always a few that actually say yes to the message that's available to all.
And Morgan, in terms of the reader's journey with the book, when they get to that last page, if they take away one thing, there's one core message that they heard loud and clear. What's that one thing you want every single reader to walk away with?
Ooh, you're baiting me. You're baiting me. We could talk for hours about the one thing. But I think to honor the listeners for this moment, what I would suggest, some younger men asked Dallas Willard on an ordinary day, like, how do you stay in God? How do you walk with God? And Dallas, in his wonderful wisdom, paused and was very slow to respond. And he said, you have to be very careful with that question because there are no ordinary days. Oh, and Shaun, it's just so validating, isn't it? Like, when have you had an ordinary day? We are living in an unprecedented pandemic, for heaven's sakes, right? And so there are no ordinary days. And so then he began to say, what is it that you can do on every day that is always available to you? And one of the most fundamental tectonic shifts in all of this was when I began to say, the thing that's in my power to do every day is before I leave my bed, when I wake, I pause and I say, God, you are my true Father, and I am your Son. And so whatever else I face when I step out of this bed today, I choose to receive you as my Father, and I as your Son, and I ask you to father me today. And Shaun, in some ways, as we said earlier, it's the door that opens up all other doors. Scarcity does replace, abundance replaces scarcity. Courage replaces fear without changing any circumstances. And what's so helpful is that is always available. It's a response to God's initiation. And what happens is that moment becomes a day because it's in our momentary life choices. It's 2-degree shifts. It's direction over destination. Our moments become our days. Our days become a decade. My newborn child is now turning 16 in a week, and he will have a car, right? Our days become our decades become a lifetime, and our lifetime becomes an eternity. And so that choice, that simple and profound choice every day to say, God, you are my Father. Would you father me today? Will change everything.
And Morgan, for the listeners, the viewers who'd like to connect with you, find out more about the book, where are some of the places we can come hang out with you on the web?
Yeah, these are deep waters. And like I said, it's available to all, but it really is for the few. And so I think what I'd ask is, in this world of so much content, so much available, for those that are ready to truly enter as fellow pilgrims, as fellow apprentices in the kingdom, there's a lot available and there's community there. And you could find that all at becomingaking.com.
Well, like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Morgan and pick up your own copy of the book. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Morgan Snyder. Once again, our book today was Becoming a King, The Path to Restoring the Heart of a Man. To connect with Morgan and find out more, a great place to start is the book's website. Once again, that's at becomingaking.com. And Morgan, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It's truly been an honor to have you on the show.
Thanks, Shaun. It's good to see your face on the screen, and it's good to connect with your tribe. Thank you for the honor.